Hey guys, what's up? Mr. Eford here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day at home. Coming at you today with a little bit of social studies vocabulary. So we're going to be talking about geography today, which is our big unit that we're kind of starting things off on. So I want to talk about a couple of words that you need to know in order to be successful with your geography unit. So I'm doing things a little bit different today. Instead of teaching off of a PowerPoint slide, I'm teaching in my classroom so that I can use my active panel behind me and we can kind of show you some things and I can demonstrate some things on the board as we go. So if you guys can hang out with me for the next few minutes, we're going to talk about the words you need to know. So here we go. Content, vocabulary, geography. All right, the first word you need to know is environment. Environment simply means our surroundings. Wherever those surroundings may be. A lot of times people think about environment and they're thinking about being out in nature. If I'm in the mountains, then my environment is probably being out in the woods with maybe a river or a waterfall or something like that going on. And that's the environment that I'm in. Or if I'm at the beach, the environment's probably the ocean and the sand. And those are all natural things, and that's fine. That is the environment. But the environment can also be something that's man-made. Here in my classroom, my environment right now is being inside of a building. I've got lights. I've got student desks all around me. That is my environment. Your environment can be your bedroom at home, wherever you happen to be at that moment. Your surroundings are your environment. So that's how we're going to define our word for social studies. Environment simply means your surroundings. Okay. Here we go. Next up, we're going to talk about cardinal directions. All right. Now, these are your four main directions: north, south, east, and west. Now, we're going to talk about a compass rose here in just a minute, which is something that you're going to find on a map. So I'm not going to talk about where those directions are located until we talk about the compass rose. But know that your cardinal directions are the four main directions: north, south, east, and west. Okay. All right. Absolute location. Okay, you've talked about this already. You've looked at it already with the 5 themes of geography, but it doesn't hurt to look at something again because absolute location is important. Absolute location is going to be a pinpoint, precise, exact spot where something is located. Now, if you're talking about on a map, we're going to throw 2 terms in here that you guys need to be aware of. And those 2 terms are latitude and longitude. Now, I underline the word and too, that's okay there. But latitude and longitude are important when we look at a map. We're going to define those words a little bit later on, but they basically make a grid on the map of lines that cross going side to side and up and down. And we can use that grid to pinpoint any location on a map and to make sure that it is a precise location. Okay, so that is absolute location. All right. Here we go. Compass rose. This is what I was talking about just a minute ago with your cardinal directions. This is a navigational instrument. It's usually found on a map, and it includes both the cardinal directions, and sometimes it can even include intermediate directions as well. So when you look at a map, oftentimes you'll see something that looks like a plus sign or a cross. And on there, you have your directions listed. So at the top, you have north. Then you have east, south, and west. Those are your cardinal directions as they appear on the map. It may be a little bit blurry on your video, but north, east, south, and west. And I always do this just kind of going clockwise around the compass rose. And I remember an acronym. One of my students actually told me this a couple of years ago. But if you look at the N, E, S, and W going around the compass rose, I always think never eat something weird. Okay, that's just good advice, but it's also a good way to remember exactly where those points are on the compass rose. Now, the compass rose can also include intermediary directions or intermediate directions, and that's the little X in the middle of the cross where you might get directions like northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest as you go around the compass rose. But these exist on the map to show you the orientation of the map. So if you get the map turned a certain way, your compass rose is always going to tell you where north is. And that's important, especially if you're trying to locate something or locate how to get from one point to another on the map. And these directions are important because they give us precise direction to travel or to go. If we're simply looking at something on a map and you say, oh, it's to the left of, well, left is something that is really kind of based on your perspective. So as I'm standing here and I'm pointing, this is my right hand. If I'm pointing to the right, If I turn my body, all of a sudden, right is pointed in a completely different direction. But those directions, north, east, south, and west, don't change because they're based on the magnetic poles of the earth. So it's important that we use terminology like what is on our compass rose when we describe a location on the map. Okay? Right, here we go, moving forward. All right, a continent. We're going to be studying the continents and oceans later on in this unit. Know that there are 7 continents on planet Earth, and those are those big land masses, and they're normally separated usually by oceans, by water in some way, shape, or form. Not all of them, but most of them have some sort of separation between one continent and another. But there's 7 main land masses on planet Earth. The continent that we live on is North America. Okay, and that includes both the United States and Canada, and also parts of Mexico as well. So that's the continent that we live on. I don't want to steal too much of my thunder from when we talk about the continents and oceans, so we'll leave it right there, and we'll talk more about the continents and oceans as we move into that section. All right. Okay, distortion. This is one that we're going to try to sort of get a visual on so that you guys can see how distortion works. But it's a change in the accuracy of shapes and direction or distances on a map versus what you see on a globe. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys something right quick on a map, and then we're going to compare that to what we would see on a globe, and we'll see if those things look the same. Okay, so hold on one second here while I grab my map. Here we go. All right, I'm going to try to hold this steady in front of the camera here so that you guys can see it. All right, on the map down here at the very bottom, okay, and I'm going to have to back up just a little bit so you guys can see this, is the continent of Antarctica. And you see me kind of pointing my pen at it here. I'll back the map up just a little bit. This is Antarctica. Notice that it looks long and flat, and it's really kind of covers almost the entire surface of the bottom of the map here, going side to side from east to west. So that's what Antarctica looks like on a map. Notice that the map is flat, okay? It is a 2-dimensional object. And then we're going to switch to look at what things look like on the globe, okay? So the globe is going to be a 3-dimensional representation of what planet Earth looks like. So I've got my globe here. You can see what the continents and the oceans look like on the globe, okay? Antarctica is at the South Pole. So we're going to tilt our globe up a little bit so you can see it. And it's kind of hard to see Antarctica. I'm going to keep it tilted like this. The base gets in the way if I don't. And I'll spin. But Antarctica is the white continent at the bottom. It looks nothing like what's on the map. You'll notice that Antarctica on the globe is much more rounded as a continent than it is on the map. And the reason why is because our world isn't flat. It's not 2-dimensional. Our world is spherical like the globe is here. So the globe is going to give us a much more accurate depiction of what those countries and what those continents look like than the map does. But maps are easier, right? It's easier to look at a map on your phone or something like that than it is to carry a globe around with you to try to find out information about where it is that you are or where it is that you are trying to go. So distortion-wise, on a map, things may look a little bit different than they do on a globe. And that's simply because our planet is not 2-dimensional. We are living on a spherical planet like what you see here on our globe, okay? All right, so that is distortion. That's what that means, is that things on a globe look different than things on a map do, okay? All right, so here we go. We're going to move forward. All right, geography. This is what we're studying. We looked at this with the 5 themes of geography as well. But geography is simply going to be the study of planet Earth, where we live, our home planet in the universe, the people who live on planet Earth, you and I and everyone else who lives on this planet, and how we use the resources that are here on planet Earth. So that's geography. That's what we're studying. And this lays the groundwork for everything that we're going to cover moving forward. As we talk about different civilizations and societies, we have to understand geography. We have to understand the resources that those people have to have in order to survive and why they chose to build their civilizations where they did. All of that goes back to geography. So we're going to be linking this in with a lot of stuff that we do moving forward. All right. Climate. All right, so climate has to do with weather patterns, and this is a part of geography as well, but it's weather patterns in an area experienced over a long period of time. So climate is not something that you can figure out just in a week or a month or even a year, but it is an average of temperatures and rainfall, precipitation, high and low temperature variances over a very long period of time. Okay, we can talk about the place that we live. North Carolina is in what's called a temperate climate. So we're going to use that word climate there, meaning that our temperatures are pretty comfortable. During the winter, it doesn't really get too cold. We don't experience many days where it stays below freezing all day. In the summertime, it doesn't really get too hot. Now, it may have felt hot, but we don't usually have days where the temperature exceeds 100 degrees. I was out west this summer. We were in Nevada, and every single day that we were there, it was 110 degrees. So a very different climate there than what we have here, where our average temperature during the summer is in the low 90s. So the climate's going to be different there. If you look at the climate in a tropical area, like in the Caribbean, if you go down to Jamaica or the Bahamas or somewhere like that, you're going to experience much warmer weather, and they don't really have a winter season there because they're closer to the equator. So that's climate. Those are just those long-term patterns of weather. How much rain do you get over the course of a year? What's the average temperature? That all has to do with climate. Okay. All right, hemispheres. Okay. Hemispheres are the way we divide the Earth up into halves, and it really ends up being quadrants. We'll talk about why that number 4 is there in just a moment. But a hemisphere is a half of the Earth. There are 4 of them, which is weird when you talk about dividing something in half. There's usually only 2 of something, whatever it is you're dividing. But on planet Earth, we have 4 hemispheres. Okay, the Earth can be divided up into the northern and southern hemisphere, but it can also be divided up into the eastern and western hemisphere. Okay, I'll try to show you guys this on the map right quick as we look at this. There are 2 dividing lines. I'm going to try to kind of stay back a little bit with the map, and we'll try to hold it sort of square here. But running across planet Earth, midway between the North and South Pole, is the equator. Okay, and if you were to follow my pen all the way across, and it's kind of hard to do this, but all the way across, this is where the equator would run. Okay, anything north of the equator is in the northern hemisphere. South of the equator is going to be in the southern hemisphere. Okay, so if you look at where we live, which is right about here, good old North Carolina in North America, we're in the northern hemisphere. We're above the equator. Okay, then we have another line, okay, coming through about right here, splitting Africa in half. Okay, going up and down. Kind of hard to follow those lines on the camera while I'm doing this. But this is called the prime meridian. Okay, the prime meridian divides the world into an eastern and western hemisphere. So everything on this side of the line is on the eastern hemisphere. Everything over here is western hemisphere. Okay, so the United States is in the western hemisphere. Okay, when we look at a map. So those are hemispheres, just the way we divide the Earth up into quadrants. All right, here we go. We're going to move forward here. All right, the equator, that's one of the lines that we just talked about, is a latitude line, which means it runs side to side, okay? It's a latitude line that runs directly between the North Pole and the South Pole, and it divides the world into northern and southern hemispheres. This line is on the 0 degree mark on planet Earth, and those latitude and longitude lines we're going to talk about, those are delineated by degrees, and it's because Earth, again, is a sphere. And when you measure things around the outside of anything that's circular, like a sphere, you're going to measure them in degrees. So we'll talk about the equator is on the 0 degree line. The interesting thing about the equator is the closer you get to it, the warmer it gets on planet Earth. So, you know, your areas like the Caribbean or like southern Florida, those are closer to the equator than we are, and that because of that, they have warmer weather throughout the course of the year. Whereas you get further north or further south from the equator, your temperature gets colder. It's just the way planet Earth works, okay? All right, we're going to move forward from the equator. We're going to continue talking about some of these terms here. All right, a key or a legend, and we're going to jump off this screen here in just a minute to talk about what a key or a legend is, and I'll kind of fumble around a little bit with the screen to show you guys how this works. But this is a section on a map when we talk about those map reading skills. The key or the legend is going to explain what certain symbols or markings on that map mean, because a map's going to convey a lot of information to us, and the key is going to help us to interpret that information and know exactly what it means. So let me hop off this for just a moment and show you guys what I'm talking about. Sorry about that with the screen, but this lets me interact with it here. Okay, so here is a map of North Carolina. Okay, now maybe a little bit hard for you to see from the screen, but each county appears in a different color. Okay, I'm actually going to bring my screen a little bit closer and see if you guys can see this. Okay, there we go. Move it. Hard to tell with this where this thing is. All right, right here it is. Sorry, the camera is a little bit hard for me to move around. But if you're looking at the screen, and I apologize if it's kind of bumping around a little bit, right here is the key or the legend. It tells us what symbol indicates where the state capital is. Where is the county seat? Where are the cities and towns located? Where are the national parks at? So this is the key or legend of the map. It helps us interpret where the symbols are. So if I look over here in Swain County and I see this picture of the tree on the map, I know by looking at the legend down here below it that indicates that there's a national park there. Okay, so that's what the key or legend of the map is used for. It helps us to interpret the information that we see on the map. Again, sorry about bumbling around with the camera. It's kind of hard to keep things on the screen where I think that they are as I'm moving the camera around. Okay, all right, let me get back to our vocabulary here. There we go. All right, and that'll let us move forward. We'll present and continue to move on with our terms here. All right, a latitude line. We talked about this when we talked about the equator just a moment ago. But these are imaginary lines that crisscross planet Earth, and they run east to west, okay? Latitude is going to run this way, okay? They run parallel to the equator. So your lines of latitude are going to be lines that are parallel to one another and they never touch, and they run side to side, just like the lines that I drew on the board there, okay? And again, this is to help us determine location on a map. This is going to form a grid once we start adding those longitude lines to it so that we can see where things are on planet Earth in a precise location. So latitude lines, side to side. All right, intermediate directions. We showed this when we talked about the compass rose. These are those directions that are in between north and south and east and west. So you've got northeast, southeast, northwest, and southwest. And since I already drew that on the board, I'm not going to do that again at this point in time. You can go back and look at that a little bit earlier if you want to see where those directions are located. All right, longitude lines or meridian lines are imaginary lines that run from the north to the south pole around planet Earth. Now, these lines are not parallel to one another like latitude lines are. They actually come together at the north and the south pole. But longitude lines are going to be lines that run up and down like this. And when you add longitude lines and latitude lines together, you end up with this crisscross grid pattern across your globe where you can determine exactly where something's located, just like you would on a grid in math if you're plotting a number on a grid line. Okay. All right. So that's longitude. That's latitude. These are lines that show up on a map that help us determine location. All right. Erase what I put on there. We'll move forward. All right. The prime meridian is similar to the equator. The equator runs as a latitude line side to side on the 0 degree mark. The prime meridian is going to be an imaginary longitude line that runs from the north to the south pole, and it runs right on that 0 degree line as well. And the prime meridian's, again, going to divide the world into an eastern and a western hemisphere, okay? So it does a similar job to what the equator does. It just splits the world into eastern and western halves. All right, guys, let's talk about region right quick. Region. Again, is one of those terms that we looked at with the 5 themes of geography, but we're looking at areas that have similar characteristics, okay? And it's important for us to do that because planet Earth is a big place. It's huge. And so for one person to study all of it at one time would be impossible. But if you can break it up into smaller parts and we can look at this little section of planet Earth or this section over here, it makes it much easier to study. So that's what regions do. It allows us to break Earth up into smaller portions or chunks for us to study. And we have several different ways of identifying regions. We have those governmental regions, or what we call formal regions, that will use a map, and we indicate by the lines that are drawn on the map that this is a state or this is a country. Those are they're formal regions, government regions. There, formal regions are functional regions. I'm sorry, are regions where we don't necessarily have lines on a map, but it indicates where someone will go or what they'll do. Things like delivery area for a pizza chain or something like that. You live in that zone, they'll deliver food to you. If you live outside of that area, they won't. That's a functional region. School zones are like that. You attend North Stanley Middle because you live in a certain area. That is your region that allows you to come to this school rather than another school in our county. And then lastly, we have perceptual regions, which are based on the way that people act, the things that we do. Sometimes the food that we eat, our culture will determine a region. We live in the South. We have sweet tea. We have grits. That's a perceptual region. You move into another area and they may not have those things. And that means you're in a different region. So we have different ways of identifying those characteristics, which we would say are similar enough for us to divide an area up into a region. All right, let's talk about some of the tropics. These are latitude lines, again, on planet Earth that help us kind of know where we are. The Tropic of Capricorn is an imaginary line of latitude that's 23.5 degrees to the south of the equator, okay? So you're down to where South America is at this point in time when you look at the Tropic of Capricorn. There's one more tropic that we'll look at in just a minute called the Tropic of Cancer, but before we do that, we have relative location here, okay? We had absolute location earlier. We have relative location now. Relative location is an easy way for us to sometimes explain to someone where something is without giving them a precise point of reference. So it's an approximate spot where something's located. Usually we say it's near something or around something. We usually compare it to another place. So if someone were to ask me, hey, Mr. Eford, I really want to go eat something at East Coast Wings. I love eating at East Coast Wings. They tell me they want to eat at East Coast Wings. And I ask them, hey, well, do you know where Walmart is? You don't know where to get the East Coast Wings. Do you know where Walmart is? And they say, yeah, I know where Walmart is. Well, if you go across the road from Walmart, there where the TJ Maxx is, you're going to find the East Coast Wings is in that parking lot. So if you know where Walmart is, you can get to East Coast Wings. That's relative location. Or if you tell someone, oh, I live about 40 miles east of Charlotte. A lot of times I go on vacation and someone asks, hey, where do you live? And I say, well, I live in New London, North Carolina. That person says, well, I've never heard of New London before. And that's when I usually say, well, it's near Charlotte. Near Charlotte is just a relative location. It tells that person, if you know where Charlotte is, you know kind of close to where I live. Okay. So it doesn't give a pinpoint location. It doesn't give a street address, but it tells you close to where something is. That's relative location. All right, scale on a map, and I'll pull our map back up here in just a minute. We'll kind of fumble around with the camera to see if we can do this. But scale shows the correlation between the size of something on a map and the actual size that it really is. Because maps are drawn much smaller than something is in reality. If you had a map of North Carolina that was the size of North Carolina, it wouldn't do you any good. It's too big to use. So we have to shrink things down on a map. The scale tells us the size and distance from one thing to another on the map, so that the map can be useful to us. So let me jump off the slide again, and we'll show you the map of North Carolina that I had up just a moment ago. And we'll try to show you where the scale is located, and we can show kind of how that works on the map. So give me just a moment here as we piddle around with this. All right, let's turn this off. All right. So here is our map of North Carolina again. I'm going to try to be a little bit better on my camera work here than I was before. All right, so if you see here on the screen, the small black and white lines, I'm going to try to get where I can draw on the screen again up here. Right here is your scale. And it shows me that this distance right here covered by the white area of this line is 25 miles. And if I go the full length of this right here is 50 miles. Okay, so if I use that to determine distance on a map, I can look, and I'll kind of back my camera up here, and I could say from the very western tip of North Carolina here in Cherokee County to the eastern edge of Macon County, which is right here, would be just a little bit over 50 miles, that distance between those 2 points. And I'm just using the scale here, okay? So if the scale says that this would be about 50 miles right here, then I can judge that that's about maybe 58 to 60 miles between here and here. Now, it's not a precise number, but it does help me to know distances on a map versus what those distances would be in real life. So that's the purpose of scale on a map, is to show us distances in relation to what they are in reality versus what we see on a map. Okay. All right, let me get my notes back up here, and we'll see if we can wrap this thing up. All right. So we'll present one more time. All right, we're going to leave scale. We're going to move on to those last couple of terms. Tropic of Cancer, we said we would talk about this one just a minute ago. Where the Tropic of Capricorn was 23.5 degrees to the south of the equator, the Tropic of Cancer is 23.5 degrees north of the equator, okay? And again, it's just one of those latitude lines that we use to determine location. All right. And guys, that's it. That's the words you need to know for geography. I hope that this presentation has been helpful to you. Remember that you are going to need to define those words on your own sheet so you can bounce back and forth between this presentation or the slideshow that I'm going to leave in your notes. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will look forward to talking to you later.